Cold, arrogant husband cooked dinner for wife on 10th anniversary. Black son screamed, "Don't eat, mama." "I saw what you put in the food," Malik whispered, backing toward the wall. In the kitchen, "You added something that wasn't supposed to be there." Have you ever been torn between protecting your child and saving your marriage? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She was about to take the bite that would kill her when her 9-year-old son burst through the door screaming, "Don't eat, mama." The candles flickered, the steak grew cold, and Mark's face transformed from loving husband to stone-cold stranger in 3 seconds flat. Have you ever had someone change completely overnight? When someone who's been cold suddenly turns warm, do you trust it or question it? What would you do if your child warned you about danger from your own husband? Stay with me to discover what Malik saw that could destroy everything. 10 years, 10 long years of marriage, and Mark had never once cooked dinner. Not for her birthday, not for Christmas, not even when she worked double shifts at the hospital and came home exhausted, still smelling like antiseptic and other people's pain. But tonight, their anniversary, he'd surprised her. The Scottsdale mansion gleamed under warm lighting, every surface polished to perfection. Crystal glasses caught candlelight like trapped fire, and the dining room looked like a magazine spread. Too perfect, too planned, too much like a stage set for deception. "You look beautiful tonight, Lil," Mark said, his voice softer than she'd heard in months. His fingers brushed her wrist as he poured wine, the first tender touch in months, sending unexpected heat through her body despite her confusion. Lillian smoothed her dress, the blue one he used to love, and tried to ignore the voice in her head, asking why tonight was different. Mark had been distant for years, buried in his law practice, speaking to her in clipped sentences about bills and schedules. She'd learned to expect coldness from the man who once made her laugh in hospital break rooms back in New York. "The steak smells incredible," she said, cutting into the meat. Blood pooled on the white china plate, and for a moment, something flickered behind Mark's eyes. "I wanted tonight to be special," he replied, watching her fork move toward her mouth. "We haven't had much time together lately." That was when Malik exploded through the dining room doors. "Don't eat, mama." The boy's voice cracked with terror, his small hands shaking as he pointed at her plate. Malik had always been quiet around Mark, walking on eggshells since they'd moved to Arizona. But tonight, fear had given him courage. "Malik, what are you doing out of bed?" Mark's voice turned sharp, the tender husband disappearing like smoke. "I saw what you put in the food," Malik whispered, backing toward the wall. In the kitchen, "You added something that wasn't supposed to be there." The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. Lillian set down her fork, the romantic spell broken by her son's words. She looked at Mark, searching his face for the confusion she expected to see. Instead, she found calculation. "The boy's been having nightmares again," Mark said smoothly, moving around the table toward Malik. "Haven't you, son?" Malik flinched at the word son. Mark had never legally adopted him, though he promised to during their engagement. Another broken promise in a marriage full of them. "I'm not lying," Malik said, his voice growing stronger. "I saw the bottle. It had someone else's name on it." Lillian's nursing instincts kicked in. "What kind of bottle, baby?" "Pills," Malik said, never taking his eyes off Mark. White pills that he crushed up. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loud in the silence. Mark's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Lillian saw something dangerous flash across his features, something she'd never noticed before or had trained herself not to see. "You're scaring your mother with these stories," Mark said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He cornered Lillian in the hallway after Malik ran upstairs, pressing her against the wall with forced intimacy. "Kids have active imaginations. You know that better than anyone." His body pressed close to hers, his breath warm against her ear. Once this proximity would have melted her resolve. Now it felt like a cage closing. "Mark, what did you put in the food?" she asked directly. His smile was cold as winter. "Something to help you sleep, baby. You've been so stressed lately." But even as he said it, Lillian remembered Malik's words. Someone else's name on the bottle. Someone else's prescription. And suddenly, The perfect anniversary dinner felt less like love and more like something much darker. As Malik's trembling finger had pointed at the perfectly plated dinner, Mark's hand had slowly moved toward the kitchen knife. Lillian's world was about to shatter, but she had no idea the real danger wasn't the food. It was the man she'd trusted for 10 years. Like this video if you're invested in finding out what Mark was really planning. Subscribe for more shocking stories. And tell me in the comments, would you trust your child's instincts over your spouse's word? Children see what adults miss because they haven't learned to ignore the obvious yet. Malik had been watching Mark for months, and tonight he'd seen enough. Have you ever been torn between protecting your child and saving your marriage? When a 9-year-old becomes the only person telling the truth, what do? Tell me in the comments. Would you trust your child's instincts? Malik sat on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, as Lillian gently closed his bedroom door behind them. The dinosaur nightlight cast shadows on the walls, making the room feel safer than the rest of the house. Tell me exactly what you saw, she whispered, sitting beside him on the Superman bed sheets. I went downstairs for water, Malik began, his voice small but steady. Mark was in the kitchen, and he didn't see me. He had this little bottle, and he was crushing pills with the back of a spoon. Lillian's heart hammered. What did the bottle look like? Orange, like the ones you bring home from work sometimes. But this one had a different name on it. Not yours, not mine, not Mark's. The kitchen still smelled of garlic and herbs, but underneath lay something chemical, something wrong. Malik's small hand shook as he pointed to the spice rack where he'd seen Mark add something that didn't belong in any recipe. What name was on the bottle, baby? Malik scrunched his face, trying to remember. It started with an E. Eleanor? Ellen? Something like that. Lillian's blood went cold. She didn't know anyone named Eleanor or Ellen. But Mark was a lawyer. He had access to estate files, medical records, personal information about clients. Dead clients. Why didn't you tell me before dinner? I tried, Malik said, tears starting to fall. But Mark was watching you so close, and he kept touching you, and I was scared he'd get mad. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate. Mark's footsteps. Is everything okay up there? Mark's voice drifted through the door, honey sweet with poison underneath. Lillian squeezed Malik's hand. We're fine. Just reading a bedtime story. Don't take too long, babe. Our dinner's getting cold. The footsteps retreated, but Lillian knew Mark was listening from the bottom of the stairs. He'd always been controlling, but lately his attention felt more like surveillance. Malik, I need you to promise me something, she whispered. Don't eat or drink anything Mark gives you. Nothing at all. Can you do that? The boy nodded solemnly. Are we in danger, Mama? The question hung in the air like smoke. Lillian wanted to lie, to protect his innocence, but Malik had already seen too much. I don't know yet, but we're going to be very careful, okay? She tucked him in a bed and kissed his forehead, breathing in his little boy's smell of shampoo and safety. When she turned to leave, his small voice stopped her. Mama, Mark's been going through your things when you're at work. What do you mean? Your purse, your jewelry box. He was looking at your life insurance papers last week. I saw them on his desk. The words hit her like ice water. Life insurance, crushing pills, a prescription bottle with a dead woman's name. The pieces weren't forming a complete picture yet, but the edges were sharp enough to cut. When Lillian returned downstairs, Mark was sitting at the dining table, wine glass in hand, watching the congealed steak with cold eyes. Everything settled up there? He asked without looking at her. He's fine, just needed some reassurance. Mark's laugh was harsh. That boy's been trying to come between us since day one. Maybe it's time we talked about sending him to his father in Atlanta. Over my dead body, Lillian said before she could stop herself. Mark's head snapped up, and for a moment his mask slipped completely. The look in his eyes was calculating, predatory. Then he smiled, and the expression was somehow worse than the coldness. Poor choice of words, don't you think? When Lillian demanded to know what Mark had put in the food, his answer chilled her to the bone. Something to help you sleep, baby. You've been so stressed lately. But Malik had seen the label. It wasn't a sleep aid. It was something far worse. Hit that like button if you're feeling the tension build, and subscribe because this story is about to get darker. Tell me in the comments, What would you do if you discovered pills with a dead person's name in your kitchen? The pills weren't prescribed to anyone in the house. They weren't even prescribed to anyone alive. What would you do if you discovered your partner had been drugging you? How far would you go to protect your child from someone you once loved? Share your thoughts below. Lillian waited until Mark's breathing deepened beside her in their California king bed. The digital clock glowed 2:47 a.m. in angry red numbers. She'd been lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, remembering every strange moment from the past few months. The sudden romantic gestures, the unexpected tenderness, the way Mark watched her eat and drink lately, always asking if she felt tired, if she needed a rest. She slipped from bed, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. The master bathroom felt like a crime scene under harsh LED lights. Medicine bottles lined the marble counter like evidence, each label telling a story of deception and desperation. Her hand shook as she searched through Mark's toiletries. Behind his expensive cologne and imported shaving cream, she found it. A small orange prescription bottle, half hidden behind bottles of vitamins and antacids. Eleanor Whitmore. The name meant nothing to her, but the medication inside made her stomach drop. Ambien. Powerful sleeping pills. Enough to knock someone unconscious for hours. Looking for something, sweetheart? Lillian spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs. Mark stood in the doorway, wearing only boxer shorts and an expression she'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, dangerous. I couldn't sleep, she stammered, dropping the bottle. Pills scattered across the marble like tiny white lies. Mark stepped into the bathroom, closing the door behind him. The space suddenly felt smaller, airless. He grabbed her wrists and pulled her close, his touch aggressive yet still stirring unwanted physical responses as he tried to seduce his way out of suspicion. You've always been too curious for your own good, he murmured against her ear. His hands slid down her arms, and she hated that her body still responded to his touch despite the fear crawling up her spine. Who is Eleanor Whitmore? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mark's grip tightened. A former client. She had trouble sleeping before she died. Died how? Peacefully, in her sleep. His smile was razor sharp. The pills helped with that. The implication hung between them like a loaded gun. Lillian's nursing background kicked in, her mind racing through the possibilities. Ambien overdose could look like natural causes, especially in an elderly woman. Especially if her lawyer was the one handling the estate afterward. How many other clients have you helped sleep peacefully, Mark? His laugh was low, dangerous. Careful, Lil. You're starting to sound paranoid. Maybe you need something to help you relax. The threat was clear, but Lillian was done being afraid. 10 years of walking on eggshells, of making herself smaller to accommodate his growing cruelty had led to this moment. Her son had tried to save her life tonight, and she wasn't going to waste his courage. I want to see the death certificate, she said. No, you don't. I want to see all of them. Every client who died while you were handling their estate. Mark's hand shot out, gripping her throat. Not hard enough to leave Mark's, but firm enough to make his point. You're going to go back to bed. You're going to forget what you think you saw, and you're never going to mention this again. But Lillian was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Her phone was recording in her robe pocket. The pill bottle was evidence. And somewhere in Mark's office files were the answers that would either clear his name or destroy their lives. His thumb pressed against her pulse point, feeling her heart race. I love you, Lil, but love has limits. Don't test mine. When he released her and left the bathroom, Lillian sank to the floor among the scattered pills. The prescription label bore the name of the patient she was starting to remember from the hospital. Eleanor Whitmore, a wealthy widow who died 6 months ago under suspicious circumstances. Mark had been her lawyer, and now her medication was in their house. But the real revelation came when her phone buzzed with a Google alert she'd set up months ago. Mark's law firm was under federal investigation for embezzlement. The article mentioned several deceased clients whose estates had been mishandled. Eleanor Whitmore was just the beginning. Smash that like button if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, and subscribe for more shocking twists. Comment below, would you confront a potential killer or try to escape first? Dead people don't need sleeping pills, but apparently, desperate lawyers do. The question was, what else had Mark inherited from his deceased client? Have you ever realized the person lying next to you was a stranger? When love becomes fear, how do you find the strength to act? Let me know in the comments if you felt that moment of terrible clarity. The laptop screen glowed in the dark guest bedroom where Lillian had retreated after the bathroom confrontation. She told Mark she needed space to think, and surprisingly, he'd let her go. Maybe he thought he'd scared her enough. Maybe he was planning his next move. The newspaper article filled the screen. Phoenix law firm under federal investigation for estate fraud. Mark's firm, Henderson & Associates, was accused of systematically draining the accounts of elderly clients who died while their cases were pending. But it was the photo that made her blood run cold. Mark, in his expensive suit, shaking hands with Eleanor Whitmore outside the courthouse. The caption read, "Attorney Mark Henderson with client Eleanor Whitmore, 3 weeks before her unexpected death." Unexpected. That was the word they used when someone healthy suddenly died in their sleep. Lillian's fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for more information. Eleanor Whitmore, 67, widow, no children, died of apparent heart failure in her Scottsdale home. Estate valued at $2.3 million. Primary beneficiary, a charity that, according to the article, seemed to exist only on paper. A charity Mark had helped her establish just months before her death. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes. Mark wasn't just embezzling from clients, he was killing them, creating fake charities, manipulating wills, and then ensuring his clients didn't live long enough to discover the theft. Her phone rang, shattering the silence. Unknown number. "Hello," she whispered. "Mrs. Henderson?" A man's voice, young, strained. "My name is David Whitmore. Eleanor Whitmore was my mother." Lillian's heart stopped. "How did you get this number?" "I've been investigating my mother's death for 6 months. Your husband's name keeps coming up. I think we need to talk." Through the bedroom door, she heard Mark moving around downstairs. The refrigerator opening, ice clinking in a glass. Normal sounds from an abnormal man. "I can't talk now," she breathed into the phone. "Then listen," David said urgently. "My mother wasn't sick. She went to sleep healthy and woke up dead. The coroner ruled it natural causes, but I had the body exhumed. Private autopsy. She died from a massive dose of Ambien mixed with alcohol." Lillian closed her eyes, picturing the pills scattered across her bathroom floor. "There's more," David continued. "I've found 4 other cases. All elderly clients of your husband's firm. All died suddenly. All left their money to fake charities that disappeared after the estates were settled. Why are you calling me?" "Because you're married to him. You have access to his files, his computers, his personal things. And because..." David's voice broke. "Because I think you might be next." The words hit her like a physical blow. She thought about Mark's sudden romantic attention, the way he'd been watching her eat and drink, the life insurance papers Malik had seen on his desk. "Mrs. Henderson, are you there?" "I'm here. I'm going to text you an address. It's a diner on the east side of town. Can you meet me tomorrow night?" 11 p.m. Lillian looked toward the door, knowing Mark was probably listening from the hallway. He'd always been paranoid, but lately, his surveillance felt more like a predator studying prey. "I don't know if I can get away." "Find a way," David said, "because my mother left evidence. She suspected something was wrong before she died. She documented everything: bank transfers, forged documents, recorded conversations. It's all in a safety deposit box that your husband doesn't know exists." The line went dead just as footsteps approached the guest room door. Lillian quickly closed the laptop and slipped under the covers, pretending to sleep. Mark's silhouette filled the doorway. "Everything okay in here, babe?" "Just couldn't sleep next to you after what happened," she said, keeping her voice small and hurt. He stepped into the room, and she felt the mattress dip as he sat on the edge of the bed. His hand found her hip through the blanket, fingers stroking in a gesture that should have been comforting but felt possessive. "I'm sorry about earlier," he said, his voice soft. "The stress from work is getting to me. The investigation, the accusations. I'm not thinking clearly." As Mark's breathing deepened beside her, Lillian's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your husband killed my mother. You're next. Get out now." The photo attached showed Malik walking to school. Someone was watching them. But this time, the someone watching might be trying to save their lives instead of end them. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this plays out, and smash the like button if you're Team Lillian. Tell me in the comments, would you meet a stranger who claims your husband is a killer? Being hunted is terrifying. Being hunted while living with a hunter is a nightmare you can't wake up from. When you realize you're living with a predator, every touch becomes a question. Is this love or control? Have you ever felt trapped by someone who claimed to protect you? Share your experience below. The school parking lot buzzed with normal life. Parents, children, teachers, but Lillian's eyes scanned every face like a surveillance camera. Safety was an illusion when danger lived in your own home. "Mama, why are you walking me to class today?" Malik asked, clutching his backpack straps. She'd never walked him all the way to his classroom before, but the photo of him on her phone had changed everything. "Just wanted to see your teacher," she lied, watching a man in a baseball cap lean against a silver sedan. Was he watching them? Or was paranoia making her see threats everywhere? Inside the school, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as children's voices echoed off linoleum floors. Everything looked normal, but Lillian felt like she was viewing it through glass, separated from the safety others took for granted. "Mrs. Henderson?" She turned to find Malik's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, approaching with concern in her eyes. "Is everything all right? Malik seemed upset yesterday, and now you're here. Has anyone been asking about Malik? Strangers, maybe? People claiming to know the family?" Ms. Rodriguez frowned. "There was a man yesterday afternoon. Said he was your husband's colleague. Wanted to know what time school let out. I didn't tell him anything, of course, but it seemed odd." Lillian's blood turned to ice water. Mark was having them watched. "If anyone else asks about my son, please call me immediately," Lillian said, scribbling her number on a piece of paper. "Don't tell them anything. And if possible, don't let Malik walk to the parking lot alone." The teacher's eyes widened. "Mrs. Henderson, are you in some kind of trouble?" Before Lillian could answer, her phone buzzed. "Mark, where are you? You didn't make coffee this morning." Such a simple text, but loaded with accusation. Mark tracked her routines like a warden monitoring an inmate. Coffee at 6:30, breakfast at 7 o'clock, kiss goodbye at 7:45. Any deviation was noted, questioned, cataloged. At Malik's school, parent conference, she texted back, "Come home. We need to talk." Those 4 words sent terror through her veins. In Mark's vocabulary, "we need to talk" was never about communication. It was about control. The drive home felt like a funeral procession. Every red light was a delay of execution. Every turn brought her closer to a confrontation she wasn't ready for. Mark was waiting in the foyer when she opened the front door, still in his silk pajamas and Italian leather slippers. His arms were crossed, and his expression was cold as winter concrete. "Interesting parent conference," he said, "especially since the school called looking for you 20 minutes ago." Malik left his lunch. Caught in the lie, Lillian felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I stopped by the grocery store afterward. No bucks." His eyes swept over her empty hands. "No receipts, no groceries." Mark stepped closer, and she caught a whiff of his expensive cologne mixed with something else, the metallic scent of fear. He was scared too, she realized. Scared of losing control. "You're acting strange, Lil. Paranoid. Maybe you need to see someone." His hands found her waist, pulling her against him with possessive force. Other parents at school drop-off had watched them interact over the years, probably thinking what a devoted husband Mark was, always touching her, always attentive. They didn't see the grip that was too tight, the smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine," she said, trying to step away. "Are you?" His voice dropped to that dangerous whisper she'd learned to fear. "Because lately, you've been asking a lot of questions, going through my things, acting like you don't trust me. Should I trust you, Mark?" The question hung between them like a blade. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. Not anger, not hurt, calculation. "Of course you should trust me," he said finally. "I'm your husband. I love you. Everything I do is to protect our family." But as he said the words, his hand moved to her throat. not quite choking, just resting there like a promise of what could happen if she pushed too hard. The meeting with David, the widow's son, was set for midnight at the old diner downtown. But as Lillian crept out of the house that night, she didn't see Mark's silhouette in the bedroom window, watching her every move. The trap was closing, and she was walking right into it. Drop a heart in the comments if you're holding your breath, and subscribe for the next chapter. Tell me below, when someone you love becomes someone you fear, how do you find the courage to fight back? The truth hits differently at midnight. In the fluorescent glare of an empty diner, Lillian learned her husband wasn't just a killer. He was a professional. How would you handle learning that your entire marriage was a lie? That every kiss, every I love you, was part of a long con? Tell me below, would you run or fight back? The Desert Rose Diner sat like an island of harsh light in the darkness, its neon sign flickering against the Arizona night sky. Lillian's hand shook as she pushed through the glass door, the bell above chiming her arrival to the nearly empty restaurant. Only one other customer sat in the back booth, a man in his 30s with tired eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. David Whitmore looked exactly like someone who'd spent 6 months hunting his mother's killer. "Thank you for coming," he said as she slid into the cracked vinyl seat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." The waitress, a woman who looked like she'd seen everything twice, poured coffee without being asked. The liquid was black as the night outside, and probably just as bitter. "You said my husband killed your mother," Lillian said quietly. "Prove it." David reached into a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Eleanor Whitmore, my mother, aged 67, perfectly healthy until she wasn't." He spread photos across the table, hospital records, bank statements, legal documents. Eleanor had been beautiful once, with silver hair and intelligent eyes that reminded Lillian of her own mother. "Mom hired your husband to update her will after Dad died," David continued. "Simple job. Should have taken a few weeks. Instead, it took 6 months. 6 months where Mark had complete access to her finances, her medical information, her daily routine." Lillian studied a bank statement showing massive withdrawals in the weeks before Eleanor's death. Where did the money go? Fake charity organizations, shell companies, accounts in the Cayman Islands. David's voice turned bitter. "Your husband is very creative when it comes to making money disappear." A police report caught Lillian's attention. Eleanor had called 911 3 days before she died, claiming someone was trying to break into her house. The responding officers found no evidence of attempted burglary. "She was scared," David said, watching Lillian read. "Started asking questions about the will, the missing money. That's when Mark suggested she needed help sleeping. Stress, he said. Maybe some medication to calm her nerves." "The Ambien," Lillian whispered. 20 pills crushed in her nightly tea, mixed with the wine Mark brought her that evening. He called it a social visit to discuss her concerns. The diner felt colder suddenly, despite the desert heat outside. Lillian wrapped her hands around a coffee cup, seeking warmth that wouldn't come. "How many others?" she asked. David pulled out more files. "For that I can prove. Probably more that I can't. All elderly, all wealthy, all clients who started asking inconvenient questions about their estates." Each file told the same story. Sudden romantic attention from Mark, offers to help with legal matters, gradual isolation from family and friends, then sudden death by apparent natural causes. "Your husband has a type," David said. "Lonely people with money and no close relatives to ask questions afterward." Lillian thought about her own situation. The insurance papers Malik had seen. Mark's sudden tenderness after years of coldness. His questions about her family in Atlanta. Her few close friendships at the hospital. "I don't fit the pattern," she said. "I'm not elderly. I don't have money." "No, but you have something else." David leaned forward. "You're a nurse. You understand medications, medical procedures, how to make deaths look natural. And you've been married to him long enough to be the perfect witness." The implication hit her like a physical blow. He's going to frame me. Think about it. Wife discovers husband is embezzling from clients, so she helps him kill them to cover up the crimes. Then something goes wrong. Maybe she gets greedy or threatens to expose him. So he's forced to kill her too. Self-defense against a dangerous spouse. Lillian's mind raced through the evidence Mark had been building against her. Her fingerprints on the pill bottles from searching his things. Her nursing background giving her access to dangerous drugs. Her presence at the hospital where some of his victims had been patients. He's been planning this for months, she realized. David nodded grimly. My mother left a safety deposit box. Audio recordings of conversations with Mark. Copies of documents he thought he destroyed. Bank records showing exactly where the money went. He slid a key across the table. This opens box 247 at First National downtown. Everything you need to destroy him is inside. As Lillian reached for the key, headlights flooded the diner windows. A familiar BMW pulled into the parking lot, and Mark's tall frame stepped out into the night. He followed you, David breathed. Through the glass, Mark's eyes met Lillian's. He smiled, the same charming smile that had made her fall in love 10 years ago. But now she saw it for what it really was, the grin of a predator who'd cornered his prey. David slid the USB drive across the table. This contains everything, bank records, photos, recordings. My mother documented his whole plan before she died. But as Lillian reached for it, headlights flooded the diner windows. Mark's BMW pulled into the lot, and his silhouette stepped out into the night. The diner door chimed again, but this time it sounded like a death knell. Smash that like button if your heart is racing, and hit subscribe because this confrontation is about to get deadly. Comment below, what would you do if a killer walked into the room while you were gathering evidence against them? 3 people in a diner, 2 exits, 1 gun. The mathematics of survival got very simple, very fast. When fight or flight kicks in, which do you choose? Have you ever had to physically defend yourself from someone you once trusted? Your stories matter. Share them below. Mark walked through the diner like he owned it, his expensive shoes clicking against worn linoleum. Even at midnight, in a place that smelled like grease and broken dreams, he carried himself like the powerful lawyer he pretended to be. Working late, honey, he asked, sliding into the booth beside Lillian. His thigh pressed against hers, claiming territory, marking ownership. I was worried when I woke up and you weren't there. David's hand moved slowly toward his jacket pocket. Lillian caught the motion and felt her pulse spike. Whatever was in that pocket, Mark had seen it too. Just couldn't sleep, Lillian said, trying to keep her voice steady. Thought a drive might help. Funny how your drive led you to this specific diner, with this specific person. Mark's voice remained conversational, but his eyes were Arctic cold. David Whitmore, isn't it? Il y a une raison. You remember me, David said through gritted teeth. I'm touched. I remember everyone who tries to interfere with my business. Mark signaled the waitress for coffee, acting like they were having a normal conversation instead of a standoff. Your mother was a lovely woman. Such a tragedy, losing her so suddenly. You killed her. The words hung in the air like smoke. The waitress, pouring Mark's coffee, pretended not to hear. In a place like this, people learn to mind their own business. Careful, Mark said softly. Accusations like that can get you in trouble. Legal trouble. I have proof. Mark's laugh was genuinely amused. Do you? Because I have something better than proof. I have reasonable doubt. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file folder, spreading its contents across the table like playing cards. Bank statements, medical records, insurance documents. See, the interesting thing about your mother's death, Mark continued, is that she wasn't the only one with access to her medication. Her nurse had been stealing pills for months, Ambien specifically. Lillian's stomach dropped as she recognized the medical records. Her signature, her patient notes, documentation from shifts she'd worked at the hospital. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? Mark's finger traced one of the documents. Nurse Lillian Henderson documented accessing patient medications outside normal protocols. Security footage showing her removing controlled substances from the pharmacy. Strange coincidence that Eleanor Whitmore died from the exact same medication. David's face had gone pale. You're framing her. I'm presenting facts. Facts that show my wife has been stealing drugs from her workplace and using them to kill my clients. When I discovered what she was doing, I tried to stop her, but she threatened to kill me too if I exposed her. The setup was masterful. Every piece of evidence pointed to Lillian as the killer, with Mark as the innocent husband who discovered her crimes too late. The perfect frame job from someone who understood how the legal system worked. "Why?" Lillian asked, her voice breaking. "Why destroy my life to cover yours?" Mark's hand found hers on the table, squeezing with false tenderness. "Because you were convenient, sweetheart. A nurse with access to drugs, married to the lawyer handling the estates. It was always going to end this way." The diner became a stage for violence as David lunged across the table, chairs overturning like dominoes as civilized pretense shattered along with the coffee cups hitting linoleum. Mark was ready for him. The gun appeared in his hand like magic, pressing against David's forehead as the younger man's momentum carried him forward. "Sit down," Mark said calmly. David froze, recognizing the look in Mark's eyes. The same coldness his mother must have seen in her final moments. "You killed 4 people," David said, slowly returning to his seat. 5, actually. There was another woman in Tucson last year. But who's counting? Mark's casual admission to serial murder made Lillian's blood turn to ice. This wasn't passion or desperation. It was business. Cold, calculated elimination of inconvenient obstacles. The gun swung toward her. "The question is, do I make it 6 and 7 tonight? Or do we find another solution?" Mark's rage contained twisted elements of possessiveness, his violence tinged with sexual dominance as he tried to physically reclaim control over Lillian. Even now, even with a gun in his hand, his other hand stroked her arm like a lover's caress. "I gave you everything," he said, voice thick with twisted emotion. "Love, security, a beautiful home. All I asked in return was loyalty." David's blood pooled on the diner floor as Mark turned to Lillian, his hands steady despite what he'd just done. "We're going home, baby. And we're going to talk about your little adventure." But Lillian had already grabbed the USB drive. The real fight was just beginning. The waitress had disappeared, probably calling 911 from the kitchen. But help would come too late for David, and maybe too late for her. Like this video if you can't believe how dark this story has gotten, and subscribe because the next chapter changes everything. Tell me in the comments, would you run or fight back against someone who had nothing left to lose? Running from your own life is easier than living it when that life was built on lies. But when you're protecting a child, running isn't enough. You have to be smarter than the predator hunting you. When you discover your whole life was a performance, how do you find your real self? Have you ever had to completely reinvent your identity to survive? Share your transformation story below. The sirens were still wailing behind them as Lillian's Honda Civic raced through Phoenix streets at 3 a.m. In the passenger seat, Malik clutched his Game Boy, the only thing she'd grabbed besides clothes and the USB drive David died protecting. "Where are we going, Mama?" he asked, his voice small in the darkness. "Somewhere safe," she lied, checking the rearview mirror for Mark's headlights. Nowhere was safe when your husband had connections throughout the legal system, when he knew your habits, your friends, your every weakness. The motel they found on the outskirts of Tempe looked like every crime scene from every cop show. Neon lights, cracked parking lot. The kind of place where people paid cash and asked no questions. The motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. But for the first time in years, Lillian felt truly safe. Lock the door, bar the windows, and finally breathe without wondering if the air itself was poison. She turned on the ancient television, volume low, while Malik curled up on one of the twin beds. The local news was already covering the diner shooting. Police are searching for suspects in the murder of David Whitmore, 34, found shot to death at the Desert Rose Diner. Witnesses report seeing a woman flee the scene. A woman, not a man and woman, just a woman. Mark had already started rewriting the story, painting himself as another victim instead of the killer. By morning, every cop in Arizona would be looking for Lillian Henderson, dangerous nurse who'd murdered her husband's client's son to cover up her drug theft ring. Her phone had been ringing non-stop since they left the diner, Mark's name flashing on the screen like a heartbeat. She finally answered on the 20th call. "Lil, baby, where are you?" His voice was honey-sweet concern, the perfect worried husband. "The police called." They said David Whitmore was killed. Are you hurt? I saw you shoot him, Mark. Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. When he spoke again, the mask was gone. You need to come home. We can work this out. Like you worked it out with Eleanor Whitmore? With the others. Those people were different. They were nobody. But you're my wife, the mother of my son. Malik isn't your son. Mark's laugh was sharp as broken glass. He will be when you're dead. Tragic accident, of course. Grief-stricken stepfather raising the boy whose mother lost her mind and got herself killed running from justice. The threat was clear. Kill Lillian, adopt Malik, and gain access to her life insurance policy. The perfect crime from someone who understood how the system worked. I have a USB drive, she said. David's evidence. Bank records, recordings, everything. No, you don't. Mark's voice was confident. Because that drive is locked in evidence at the police station taken from David Whitmore's body. Amazing how evidence can disappear when you know the right people. Lillian's heart sank. If Mark had connections in the police department, if he could make evidence vanish and witnesses disappear, then she was fighting more than just one man. She was fighting an entire corrupt system. You can't run forever, Lil, and you can't protect Malik from your motel room. The line went dead just as breaking news flashed across the television screen. Nurse wanted in connection with multiple murders. Her hospital ID photo filled the screen, along with details about her alleged drug theft and the supposed evidence linking her to Eleanor Whitmore's death. The story was already written, the narrative set. Desperate nurse kills wealthy patients for drugs and money, murders witness to cover her crimes. But as Lillian watched her life being destroyed on live television, she felt something unexpected rising in her chest. Not fear, not despair, anger. Mark had underestimated her. He thought she was still the frightened woman who'd walked on eggshells for 10 years, who'd accept blame and punishment because it was easier than fighting back. He was wrong. The knock on the motel room door came at 3 a.m. Soft, gentle like a lover's touch. Open up, Lil. I know you're scared, but we can work this out. Mark's voice carried through the thin wood, honey sweet with poison underneath. But Lillian was done being afraid. She'd spent 10 years learning to be the perfect victim. Now it was time to become something else entirely. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to see Lillian fight back. And like this video if you're team survival. Comment below, what would you do if the entire system was rigged against you? She'd spent 10 years learning to be the perfect victim. It was time to become the perfect predator. What would you do to protect your child from a predator? How far would you go to ensure your family's safety? Tell me in the comments. Where's your line in the sand? The pharmacy opened at 6 a.m., and Lillian was waiting in the parking lot with skills Mark had forgotten she possessed. 10 years as a nurse had taught her more than just how to heal. She understood anatomy, chemistry, and exactly which medications could incapacitate without killing. Stay in the car, baby, she told Malik, handing him her phone. If anyone comes near except me, call 911. Inside the pharmacy, she moved with purpose. Syringes, bandages, and 3 bottles of medication that would help even the odds between her and a man twice her size. The pharmacist recognized her from the news reports. Lillian saw it in his eyes. The moment recognition clicked, followed by uncertainty about what to do. Call the police? Pretend not to notice? Run? I'm not who they say I am, she said quietly, placing cash on the counter. But I will be if you try to stop me. He took the money and looked away. Back at the motel, Lillian spread her supplies across the bathroom counter like a surgeon preparing for operation. Malik watched from the doorway, older than his 9 years in the way children become when the world proves it isn't safe. Are you going to hurt Mark? He asked. The question hung in the air between them. Lillian thought about Eleanor Whitmore, about David bleeding out on diner linoleum, about all the people Mark had killed for money and convenience. I'm going to stop him, she said finally. Sometimes stopping bad people requires doing hard things. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check channel 12. The news report made her blood boil. Mark, impeccably dressed and perfectly composed, standing outside their Scottsdale home with tears in his eyes. My wife has been struggling with addiction for months, he told the reporter. I tried to get her help, but she refused treatment. Now she's taken our son and gone into hiding. I just want them both to come home safely. The performance was masterful. Concerned husband, devoted stepfather, victim of a dangerous woman's mental breakdown. But Lillian noticed something the cameras missed. The slight smile when he thought no one was watching. The way his eyes remained dry despite the supposed tears. Mark was enjoying this. The attention, the sympathy, the power of controlling the narrative. That's when she knew exactly how to destroy him. The abandoned warehouse stretched out like a concrete cathedral, empty space filling with echoes and possibilities. Every shadow could hide salvation or destruction. Lillian had chosen the location carefully, isolated enough to avoid witnesses, but with multiple exit routes in case her plan went wrong. She'd spent the day preparing, using knowledge Mark didn't know she had. Her phone call to him was brief. "I have something you want. The real USB drive. David made copies before you killed him." "Where?" "Warehouse District, 1247 Industrial Boulevard. Come alone, or I destroy everything and disappear." "Lil, baby, you're making this harder than it needs to be." 1 hour, Mark. Just you and me." She hung up and checked her preparations one final time. Syringes filled with sedative, hidden in strategic locations. Exit routes marked and cleared. Malik safe with the motel manager's wife, who'd agreed to watch him for $100 and no questions. Lillian positioned herself in the center of the warehouse, using Mark's physical attraction to her as bait, her body becoming a weapon in the psychological warfare between them. When his BMW pulled up outside, she felt something shift inside her chest. For 10 years, she'd been afraid of this man, afraid of his temper, his coldness, his ability to make her feel small and worthless. But fear was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. Not when Malik's life depended on her strength. Mark walked into the warehouse like he was entering a courtroom. Confident, controlled, certain of his victory. He'd underestimated her before. Tonight, that mistake would cost him everything. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying across the empty space. "Ready to come home?" Lillian stepped into the light, and for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. The plan was perfect. Mark would arrive thinking he'd cornered his prey, but instead, he'd walk into a trap 10 years in the making. The only question was whether Lillian had truly become cold enough to spring it. Hit that like button if you're ready for the showdown, and subscribe because the finale is going to be explosive. Tell me in the comments, do you think Lillian has what it takes to beat Mark at his own game? Justice isn't always served in courtrooms. Sometimes it's served in empty warehouses by women who refuse to be victims anymore. When justice finally comes, does it feel like victory or just relief? Have you ever confronted someone who hurt you? Share your story of standing up to your fears. The warehouse felt like a cathedral of concrete and shadows. Mark's footsteps echoing off empty walls as he approached where Lillian waited. Even here, in this place of judgment, he moved with the arrogance of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "You look tired, baby," he said, stopping 10 feet away. "Close enough to talk, far enough to run if needed. This whole fugitive thing doesn't suit you." Neither did being married to a killer. Mark laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls like broken glass. "Is that what you think this is about? Justice? Revenge? You're smarter than that, Lil." He started circling her slowly, a predator evaluating prey. But this time, Lillian didn't flinch. She'd spent too many years making herself smaller to accommodate his anger. Tonight, she stood her ground. "Where's the USB drive?" he asked. "Safe, along with copies of everything David found. Bank records, audio recordings, documentation of 5 murders." 6, Mark corrected casually. "David makes 6. The casual admission should have shocked her, but Lillian was past shock, past fear, past everything except the cold calculation Mark had taught her through 10 years of emotional warfare. "You're going to confess," she said. Mark stopped walking, genuinely surprised. "Am I?" "You're going to call Detective Martinez and tell him exactly what you did. Every murder, every theft, every lie. Then you're going to turn yourself in." "And why would I do that?" Lillian pulled out her phone, showing him the recording app that had been running since he entered the warehouse. Because you just confessed to 6 murders on camera. And this recording is being live-streamed to a private server that uploads to social media if I don't check in every hour. For the first time since she'd known him, Mark looked uncertain. You're bluffing. David taught me a few things about digital insurance policies before you killed him. Mark's hand moved to his jacket pocket, the same movement she'd watched him make in the diner. But this time, Lillian was ready. The syringe caught him in the neck before he could draw the gun, 50 milligrams of sedative flooding his system faster than he could react. His eyes widened in shock as his legs gave out, muscle control disappearing as the drug took hold. "What did you give me?" he slurred, hitting the concrete floor hard. "Something to help you sleep," Lillian said, echoing the words he'd used about the dinner that would have killed her. "You've been so stressed lately." Police sirens wailed through the night like a choir of justice, red and blue lights painting the warehouse walls in colors of reckoning. Detective Martinez was the first through the door, gun drawn, backup streaming in behind him. Lillian had called them the moment Mark hit the ground. "He's sedated, not dying," she told the detective. "Though I can't promise he won't have nightmares." As they lifted Mark's unconscious form onto a stretcher, his eyes fluttered open, focusing on Lillian with something that might have been respect. "You're stronger than I thought," he mumbled through the drug haze. "I always was. You just made me forget for a while." The evidence was overwhelming once police had access to David's hidden files. Bank records showing systematic theft from elderly clients. Audio recordings of Mark discussing murder plans. Video footage from Eleanor Whitmore's security system showing Mark entering her house the night she died. The fake charities, the forged wills, the elaborate frame job designed to make Lillian the fall guy, all of it documented in meticulous detail by victims who'd known they were in danger. Mark's trial made national headlines. The charming lawyer who'd killed at least 6 people for money, who'd planned to frame his own wife for his crimes. The media loved the story, especially the part where the intended victim turned hunter. But the cameras and reporters didn't capture the real victory. That came later, in a small courtroom, when Judge Williams read the sentence. Life in prison without possibility of parole. Mark never looked at her during the sentencing, but Lillian watched his face as the words hit him. For 10 years, he controlled every aspect of their life together. Now he would spend the rest of his life in a cell, controlled by others. As the handcuffs clicked around Mark's wrists, he looked at Lillian with something that might have been respect. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. "I almost loved you for real." Her response would haunt him in prison. "Almost doesn't count." Justice had been served. But for Lillian and Malik, the real work was just beginning. Smash that like button if this ending gave you chills, and subscribe for more stories of survival and strength. Comment below, do you believe people can truly change, or do they just reveal who they always were? 6 months later, Lillian stood in her new kitchen in Savannah, Georgia, watching Malik laugh as he helped his grandmother knead biscuit dough. The sound filled spaces in her heart she didn't know were empty. Have you ever noticed how healing doesn't happen in the places where you got hurt? Sometimes you have to go home to remember who you were before the storm. The Georgia humidity wrapped around her like her mother's arms. After Mark's conviction, she'd sold the Arizona house and moved back to Atlanta, close to family who remembered her strength before it was stolen. "Mama, Grandma says you used to climb this same peach tree when you were little," Malik called out, dirt under his fingernails, joy in his voice. She smiled, watching him discover roots she'd almost forgotten. The boy who'd save her life was finally acting like a child again. No more watching doorways. No more nightmares about bad men in expensive suits. Her phone buzzed. David's name appeared on the screen. They'd been talking every day since his recovery. 3 surgeries later, he walked with a slight limp, but his smile could still make her forget her own name. "How's my favorite hero doing today?" His voice carried that warm laugh she'd grown to love. "Which one?" Malik just caught a frog the size of a dinner plate. "I meant you beautiful, though I'd like to meet that frog." Heat crept up her neck. Even through the phone, David could make her feel like a teenager with her first crush. After years of Mark's cold control, David's warmth felt like sunshine after winter. "When are you coming to visit us?" she asked, stirring sweet tea on the stove. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I'm driving down this weekend, if that's okay with you. Her heart did that fluttering thing it only did when he spoke. More than okay. Good, because I have something important to ask you. Before she could respond, Malik ran in, covered in mud and grinning. Mama, can David come to my school's father-son fishing tournament? All my friends want to meet the man who helped catch the bad guy. Lillian's throat tightened. In Georgia, Malik had found his voice again. He talked about Mark now, without fear, understanding that some adults break their promises, but not all of them do. You'll have to ask him yourself this weekend, she said, ruffling his hair. That night, after Malik was asleep, she sat on the porch swing her father had built 30 years ago. The crickets sang their familiar song, and fireflies danced in the tall grass. Her phone rang. Mark's lawyer. Mrs. Henderson, I need to inform you that my client has filed an appeal. Her blood chilled. What does that mean? Probably nothing. His case was solid. But there's something else. He's been writing letters. To you. The prison has been intercepting them, but I thought you should know. Her hand shook. Even locked away, he was still trying to reach her. What do the letters say? Threats. Promises. The usual obsessive behavior. Mrs. Henderson, you need to know something. Men like Mark don't give up. Even from prison, they find ways to hurt people. After hanging up, she sat in the darkness, fear creeping back like smoke under a door. But then she remembered something David had taught her in that warehouse. Monsters only have the power you give them. Mark was behind bars, and she was surrounded by people who would fight for her. She pulled out her phone and sent David a text. I love you. Come home soon. For the first time in her life, she'd chosen her own happy ending. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and share this story with someone who needs to remember their own strength. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between fear and love? David arrived on Friday with a truck full of lumber and a smile that made Lillian's knees weak. He'd driven 12 hours straight from Phoenix, stopping only for gas and coffee. You know you don't have to build me a deck, she said, watching him unload 2x4s in her driveway. I'm not building you a deck. I'm building us a place to sit and watch sunsets. That word, us, sent butterflies through her stomach. Have you ever met someone who sees your future clearer than you do? Someone who builds dreams with their hands instead of just talking about them? Malik ran outside, launching himself into David's arms like he'd been waiting all week. David, did you bring the fishing poles? In the truck, buddy. But first, I need to talk to your mama about something important. Lillian's heart hammered. The way he looked at her, serious but gentle, made her think about the ring she'd thrown at Mark's feet a year ago. That evening, after Malik was asleep, they sat on the porch steps, sharing a bottle of wine. David's hand found hers in the darkness. Lillian, I need to tell you something. That night in the warehouse, when Mark shot me, I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared of never getting the chance to love you properly. She turned to face him, moonlight catching the silver in his hair. I've been thinking about this for months, he continued, about how life is too short to dance around feelings, too fragile to waste on fear. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. David, I'm not asking you to forget your past. I'm asking you to build a future. With me, with Malik, in whatever state you want, at whatever speed feels right. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the porch light like a captured star. I know it's been less than a year. I know you're still healing. But I also know that some people spend their whole lives looking for what we found in a diner at midnight. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not the scared tears she'd cried with Mark, but the grateful kind that come when someone sees all your broken pieces and calls them beautiful. Yes, she whispered. God, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and for the first time in a decade, she felt like herself again. Not Mark's wife, not a victim, not a survivor, just Lillian, choosing love on her own terms. They made love that night on the couch, slow and sweet, with her grandmother's quilt wrapped around their shoulders. His hands traced the scars Mark had left, the ones you could see and the ones you couldn't, and somehow made them feel like battle wounds instead of shame. Afterward, lying in his arms, she told him about the lawyer's call, about Mark's letters and the appeal. Are you scared? He asked, his thumbs stroking circles on her shoulder. Terrified, but not of him. I'm scared of losing this. Losing you. Losing the life we're building. Then we'll build it stronger. Together. Through the window, she could see Malik's room, where he slept peacefully for the first time in months. In the morning, they'd tell him about the engagement, about David moving to Georgia, about becoming a real family. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your engagement. I saw the pictures. You look happy. Don't worry, I'll be out soon. M***. David felt her body tense. What is it? She showed him the message. How? Is he texting from prison? I don't know. But David, what if? No, don't let him steal tonight. We'll deal with whatever comes, but tonight is ours. Subscribe if you believe love can conquer fear, and drop a comment if you've ever had to choose between running away or standing your ground. What would you do if your past tried to destroy your future? The call came on a Tuesday morning while Lillian was making pancakes for Malik's birthday. Mrs. Henderson, Mark Henderson escaped during a prison transport yesterday. We believe he's heading to Georgia. The spatula slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a clatter. Have you ever felt your whole world shift in the space of a heartbeat? When a monster you thought was locked away comes looking for you. David was beside her in seconds, reading her face like a map of terror. Get Malik. Now, she whispered. Within an hour, their house was surrounded by police cars. FBI agents sat in her living room, explaining protection protocols while Malik hid behind David's legs, understanding without words that the bad man was coming back. He killed a guard and 2 other prisoners during the escape, Agent Rodriguez explained. This man is extremely dangerous and highly motivated. We believe he's obsessed with reclaiming what he sees as his family. We're not his family, Lillian said, her voice steadier than she felt. In his mind, you are, and that makes him unpredictable. That night, lying in a safe house in Atlanta, she couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like Mark's face. David held her close, whispering promises in the dark. He won't get to you. I won't let him. You can't fight him alone. Not again. I won't be alone. This time, we have help. The FBI had set a trap. They'd leaked false information about Lillian and Malik's location, drawing Mark to an abandoned warehouse outside Savannah, the same type of place where she'd first fought back. But Mark was smarter than they'd expected. Thursday afternoon, Lillian was at the safe house when her phone rang. Malik's school number. Mrs. Henderson, there's been a situation. A man claiming to be Malik's stepfather picked him up early. He had official-looking paperwork. The world tilted. What did he look like? Tall, well-dressed, very convincing. He said there was a family emergency. She dropped the phone, screaming David's name. They found Mark's message on her car windshield 20 minutes later. Asterisk, meet me where it all started. Our house in Arizona. Come alone, or the boy pays for your mistakes. Asterisk, it's a trap, Agent Rodriguez said. We can't let you go. He has my son. Lillian's voice cut through their arguments like a knife. My boy who saved my life is out there with that monster because of me. Lillian, please, David started. No, I know Mark better than anyone. He'll kill Malik just to hurt me, then disappear forever. The only way to save my son is to give him what he wants. And what's that? She looked at her engagement ring, then at David's worried face. Me, by sunset, she was on a plane to Phoenix, a wire taped to her chest, and a tracking device in her shoe. The FBI would follow, but from a distance. As Georgia disappeared below the clouds, she thought about the woman who'd flown this same route 10 years ago. Young, naive, in love with a handsome lawyer who promised her the world. That woman was gone. In her place sat someone harder, wiser, more dangerous. Someone who'd learned that sometimes love means walking into hell to save the people you can't live without. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Asterisk, I always knew you'd come back to me. We're going to be a family again. Forever this time. Asterisk. She typed back. Asterisk, I'm coming. But if you hurt my son, I'll make you beg for prison. Asterisk. The plane began its descent into Phoenix. Below, the desert stretched out like a battlefield, red and unforgiving under the setting sun. This time, she was ready for war. Smash that like button if you'd walk into danger to save someone you love. And share this story if you believe mothers will move mountains for their children. Tell me below, how far would you go to protect your family? The Arizona house looked exactly the same. Perfectly manicured lawn, expensive cars in the driveway. Not a single thing out of place. Mark always did love his appearances. Lillian sat in her rental car, watching the windows for movement. The FBI van was parked 3 blocks away, agents listening to every word through her wire. Her hands shook as she walked to the front door. The key still worked. He'd never changed the locks, probably hoping she'd come back someday. "I'm home," she called out, stepping into the foyer where her nightmare had started. "Mama." Malik's voice came from the kitchen, followed immediately by Mark's calm reply. "Don't run, son. Your mother and I need to talk first." She found them at the same dining room table where this all began. Mark sat in his usual chair, wearing an expensive suit like he was still the successful lawyer instead of an escaped murderer. Malik was beside him, duct tape around his wrists but otherwise unharmed. "You look beautiful, darling. George's suits you. Let him go, Mark. This is between us. Everything I do is about us. About our family." He gestured to the table, set for 3 with her good china. "I made dinner. Your favorite, grilled salmon with asparagus. Have you ever stared evil in the face and realized it looks just like ordinary disappointment? Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who truly believe their own lies." "I'm not eating your food." He laughed, the sound colder than winter wind. "Smart girl. You've learned so much since you left. But you still came back, just like I knew you would." "I came back for him." She nodded toward Malik. "No, you came back because you belong to me. Because 10 years of marriage means something, even if you've been playing house with that Phoenix fool." "David isn't a fool. He's a good man. David is dead." Her blood turned to ice. "What?" "Car accident yesterday morning. Terrible thing. Lost control on a mountain road in Colorado." Mark's smile was arctic. "I was in prison when it happened, of course. Just a coincidence." She knew he was lying. Had to be lying, but doubt crept in like poison. "You're wrong. Check your phone. I'm sure there are messages." With trembling fingers, she looked at her screen. 7 missed calls from David's number, all from yesterday. The last text was from his sister. *, Lillian, please call me. There's been an accident. *, the room spun. Mark had taken everything. Again, now that we've cleared the air, he continued, cutting his salmon with surgical precision. "Let's discuss our future. I've already arranged new identities for us. Mexico first, then somewhere more permanent." "I won't go." "You will. Because if you don't, I'll hurt the boy in ways that will make your nightmares look like fairy tales." Malik's eyes were wide with terror, but he wasn't crying. Her brave little boy, staying strong even when the monster wore a nice suit. "There's just one problem with your plan," she said, reaching into her purse. "And what's that, darling?" "I'm not the same woman you married." She pulled out the small vial she'd prepared before leaving Georgia. The same drug Mark had tried to use on her, concentrated enough to drop a grown man in 30 seconds. "You think you're the only one who learned new tricks in prison?" she asked, stepping closer. "Lillian, don't do something stupid. Stupid would be believing you've changed. Stupid would be letting you hurt anyone else." The syringe caught the dining room light as she pulled it from behind her back. "Guards!" Mark shouted, but no sound came from the rest of the house. "They can't hear you. I cut the phone lines 20 minutes ago." For the first time in 10 years, Mark Henderson looked afraid. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in fighting back, and share this story if you know sometimes justice wears a mother's face. Comment below. When evil comes for your family, how far will you go to stop it? Mark collapsed within seconds, the same drug he'd used on his victims finally finding its way into his own bloodstream. Lillian worked quickly, using zip ties from his own garage to secure his hands and feet. The FBI burst through the front door as she was freeing Malik from his restraints. "Mama, I knew you'd come," her son whispered against her shoulder. "I never stopped believing." 2 hours later, she stood in the Phoenix police station, watching them load Mark into a prison transport van. This time, there would be no appeals, no letters, no escaping. Multiple murder charges, kidnapping, assault on federal officers. He'd die in prison, and the world would be safer for it. Her phone rang. David's name on the screen. Lillian? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Her knees nearly gave out. You're alive. Of course I'm alive. What are you talking about? Mark said there was an accident. Baby, I'm fine. I've been in Denver, meeting with wedding planners like you asked. My phone died, and I didn't have a charger until an hour ago. She laughed through her tears, the sound mixing with Malik's giggles as he played with an FBI agent's handcuffs. Have you ever realized that sometimes the happy ending isn't the one you planned, but the one you fought for? That love isn't just about finding the right person, but about becoming the right person. 6 months later, Lillian stood in her mother's backyard in Atlanta, wearing her grandmother's wedding dress and her own strength like armor. Malik walked her down the aisle, grinning in his little tuxedo, proud to give his mother away to the man who'd helped save their lives. David waited at the altar, looking handsome in his navy suit, a slight limp the only reminder of that terrible night in the diner. His eyes filled with tears as she approached, not because she looked beautiful, though she did, but because she looked free. Dearly beloved, the preacher began, but Lillian barely heard the words. She was thinking about the woman she used to be, the one who'd been so afraid of being alone that she'd accepted cruels instead of love. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, more dangerous when threatened. Someone who'd learned that the best way to honor your past was to refuse to let it define your future. You may kiss the bride. David's lips were soft against hers, tasting like promises and new beginnings. The crowd cheered, rice flying through the Georgia air like confetti made of hope. Later, at the reception, she danced with Malik to his favorite song, watching him laugh as he stepped on her feet. "Mama, are you happy now?" he asked. "The happiest I've ever been, baby." "Good, because I like it when you smile with your whole face." As the evening wound down, she and David sat on the back porch, her head on his shoulder, watching fireflies dance in the peach trees. "Any regrets?" he asked. She thought about Mark, probably sitting in his cell right now, planning revenge he'd never get to execute. She thought about the scared woman who'd almost eaten poisoned food, who'd lived 10 years walking on eggshells around a monster in an expensive suit. "Just one," she said finally. "What's that?" "I wish I'd been brave enough to leave sooner, to save myself before I needed saving. But then we might never have found each other." She smiled, twisting her wedding ring in the moonlight. "Then I guess everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to." Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's building a life so beautiful that their memory can't touch it. In Savannah, a little boy sleeps peacefully, knowing that monsters can be beaten and that love always wins in the end. And in Colorado, a woman learns every day that she's worthy of the happiness she fought so hard to find. Smash that like button if you believe in new beginnings. Subscribe for more stories of courage conquering fear, and tell me in the comments, what would you build on the ashes of your worst days? Thank you for watching The Anniversary Trap. Share this story with someone who needs to remember their own strength. And remember, you're braver than you believe and stronger than you seem.